Should you upgrade your Toko Marui recoil? Find out in this episode of AATV. Hi and welcome back to AATV. I'm Tom Anvil Hibberd, and today we're going to talk about the last set of upgrades we've put into our TM Mk18 Mod 1. Then we'll also talk about whether I think it's worth upgrading them at all, or even if you should buy one in the first place. So let's get going. So the last time we spoke, we changed the barrel and hop out. We put a Prometheus EG Barrel, Prometheus purple bucking and a Firefly Flat Nub in. And that just crept the range out because it meant we were able to use slightly heavier BBs. It also raised the FPS up, or the power up, about 10 FPS and about 0.1 joules, which meant we had to drop the spring power back down again. So with our FPS limits, sometimes upgrading barrels can take you over site legal limits. Okay, so what did we do this time? We put in a few upgrade parts. The most notable one was probably the Titan Gate NGRS ETU trigger unit, which is an onboard computer unit which controls the functions of the gun. And we'll talk about what difference that's made in a minute. Put in a few extra bits, some Prometheus parts, some Lonex parts. I did put in a Prometheus piston and piston head, which self-destructed. Don't really know why. Might have been a manufacturing fault, might have been something I did. Don't really know, but I've got the stock Toko Marui piston and piston head back in there now. Seems to be running just fine on that. So really, this is about as far as it's going to go. Unless something goes pop, then I'll replace it. But at the moment, this is the way the gun is going to stay. So let's just talk about the differences our sets of upgrades have made over the last few months. So the trigger response as stock straight out of the box was around 0.91 seconds, so it varied from about 0.1 seconds down to as slow as, or fast as 0.87, which is a tiny bit slow. I've got stock guns that do better than that. That's using a 2600 milliamp battery, 7.4 LiPo in the stock. Great big one, does make a big difference. I've never had a problem with lockup using that battery. When we put the basic upgrade in, that was effectively a new set of gears, some metal bushings and a power upgrade. With trigger response dropped to 0.83, so about 0.01 of a second. It's noticeable, you can just about discern it with the human ear. And I was quite happy with that, it felt quite crisp. Some other guns I've got, this one has a trigger response of about 0.75. It does have a high torque motor. This one's about the same. So when I put the Titan in, that dropped it again. So again, we had a 0.083 second trigger response with the basic upgrade, and with the Titan 0.078, so tiny little change. You can just about tell, but not really. However, the biggest change was when we turned the precock on the Titan. Okay, now it's in precock. And this was on the medium boost, so not on the high boost. There's a chance to get a bit more out, but that would put more strain on the gearbox. That dropped down to 0.053 seconds, so that was quite significant. So just about half the trigger response from stock to Titan with precock on, which is really nice. It does feel really crisp when it fires. The trigger response is quite instantaneous. It's not as instantaneous as this gas blowback, but that's one of the great things that gas blowbacks do. My other guns with MOSFETs in are pretty similar. This one this is a Perron on precock. It responds really well. and this one has a tightening, and that responds really well as well. Actually, this has a tightening as well. So they're all about the same. The rate of fire. So the rate of fire stock, again with a 2600 milliamp 7.4 LiPo battery, was 14 rounds per second. When we did the basic upgrade, we went to 15 rounds a second, and when we went to the Titan, we went to 16 rounds a second. So the Titan, just because of the way it releases energy into the gearbox and the motor, is just a little bit faster on rate of fire and has a little bit better trigger response. So one of the other things I did is I wanted to drop the power slightly. It was fine on sight limits if I was using a heavy BB, but if I sight chronoed on 0.2s, it would be over the kind of standard 350 FPS on a 0.2 UK standard limit. So I've dropped it back down to 340, and I did that by taking out the upgrade spring guide we had in and just putting back in the stock one. We're getting very, very good compression from the stock piston and cylinder and the upgraded cylinder head. I kept the cylinder in. It was nicely made. I've got an upgrade one. I really didn't see the point in changing it. I'm getting very, very good air seal, and generally Prometheus purples set up well have a good air seal as well. So the air seal is fantastic. The consistency is very good between 1 and 2 FPS variants. Normally it's within 1, so I'm super happy with that. It's really nice. So plus or minus 1 FPS. So range on a stock gun, we did get results out to 60 meters with a 0.28 gram BB. Now that was with the hop on a lot, and it was probably over hopped. So realistically, it's about 50 to 55 meters, with your effective range being 40 to 45 meters. When we put the power upgrades in, we could over hop out to 80. Though realistically, the maximum range was around 70, 75, and the effective range again pushed back about 10 meters, 10, 15 meters out to about 60, 65. That's with it doing about 1.12 joules, which is just under the standard UK sight limit. When we put the new barrel and hop in, that effectively allowed us to maintain a bit of power. The gun was just more efficient, which meant we could lift heavier BBs. So I've now switched with this gun to a 0.32 gram BB, and that will launch. This will get it out well past 80 meters when it's over hopped. But again, practical flat range, battle sight range is around 70, 75 meters. So we've not really got much of an increase at all. However, it allows you to use the heavier BB. Heavy BBs tend to be more accurate, and heavy BBs are much less affected by the wind, and they tend to shoot a lot flatter. So the cost. I bought this straight up from Eagle 6 as a customer, because I wanted to be super honest with you guys about this. It was £550 stock. There's probably, I think I added up, there's easily £450 worth of components in it now. So it's basically a £1,000 gun. That's not including things like optics, GMP D-ball, clone Surefire with the real Surefire head, the £250 worth of magazines I've got, the 3 batteries I've got. So once this has got all optics and everything else on it, it's a £1,500 gun. Is it worth £1,500? No. I've got guns that cost a lot less, that perform just as well. So if you were to get a TM, what do I recommend that you do? The first thing I do is put some BBs in the magazines, put a battery in it, and go and enjoy it for a few games. It's perfectly competitive with no upgrades whatsoever. You'll be absolutely fine. If you find that your range is a bit lacking on a big woodland game, you can do a modest power upgrade. The gears inside here are perfectly fine at British power levels for a while. I'm not going to say they're going to last forever, but they're absolutely fine for a while. So you might want to get a very simple, modest power upgrade. You can do that yourself if you're fairly handy. If you're not, there's any number of techs that can change a spring out for you. The other thing you might consider, which is relatively not invasive, is changing the barrel out for a tight bore. You don't need a PDI or an EG or a Prometheus. You can run any decent quality tight bore in there, and probably flat hop. When you do that, you may as well flat hop it, and that will cost you, between the spring, the barrel and the hop, probably around 100 quid. You'll probably get your range pushed out 15-20 meters, which is fantastic. You probably get out to 70 meters, which is fantastic. That will also probably get you up quite happily to 340, 330 FPS, and you'll be very, very, very competitive. And just leave it there. It's absolutely fine. There is no real need to spend hundreds of pounds on upgrades unless you really want to and you have the spare cash. At which point, who cares? Enjoy yourself. So performance-wise, is this worth the money? Well, for a £1,000 gun that performs just as well as a £300 gun or a £300 gun, it's very hard to justify it. These two both shoot 70-75 meters. They're both as accurate. They both have very good trigger response. It's very hard to argue that the 700 extra pounds that went into this is worth the money. Yes, it has bolt stop. Yes, it has recoil. So it's not really recoil. It's quite nice. It's quite immersive. Gives you a bit of a thud, but it's not particularly recoil. This GHK GBBR has much stronger recoil. It would be. It's a gas rifle. Okay. And my LCT EBB also has much stronger recoil. In fact, so strong recoil, it's currently in bits. So if you want a gun that has a bolt stop, stop on empty feature and some recoil, and you don't want to pay Marui prices, look at the KW ERG range. Loads of ARs, all different shapes and sizes. My mate Phil from Clearwater Airsoft absolutely loves his. Big evangelist for them, and I can see why. Getting on for half the price of a Tokyo Marui. The KWAs are built very well. It may not be a one-to-one clone, so you may not get the trademarks and markings, but you can get those put on by someone else. You can get them engraved if that's what you really desire. So has this project been worth it? In terms of performance, no, not really. It's just as good as any of my other upgraded guns. But does that mean it's been a waste of time? No, not at all. It's been fascinating finding out the myths from the facts surrounding Tokyo Maruis. And there are many things that I really like about this, including its build quality and the way it makes me feel when I use it. It's still very immersive. There are guns with bigger recoil. There are guns that kick harder. There are guns which shoot further. There are guns which look more realistic. It's a great blend and a compromise. However, you will pay for it. And if you're looking for the best performance against the money that you spend, this is not the road to go down. Would I do it again? Probably not. And on that bombshell, I'm going to leave you. I've been Tom from AATV. Please like, subscribe, ding that bell to get notifications when we upload, and I'll see you next time.